She may have friend-zoned Quasimodo in the movie version of Hunchback of Notre Dame, but Disney's version is a far cry from what really happened in Victor Hugo's original novel, Our Lady of Paris. In fact, in the true version of the story, Esmeralda actually has a horrific start to her narrative, and her ending, even more gruesome. In fact, you probably won't want to know how things really ended in Victor's novel because you won't be able to eat for weeks. And Phoebus? Well, let's just say he has some sneaky moments of his own that may make you stop believing in Prince Charming. Esmeralda's start in The Hunchback of Notre Dame is not for the faint of heart. We don't really get much detail into her backstory in the movie, only that she is a gypsy who makes a living dancing on the streets, seems relatively happy with her life, and has a pet goat named Jolly. But according to the original version, this is far from the truth. Actually, Esmeralda isn't even her real name. She was born Agnes in a small town outside of Paris called Reims, and her true mother, a French woman named Paquette Guiberteau. It's actually kind of sad because her real mom actually had a pretty rough start herself. Esmeralda's grandfather was a musical entertainer and ended up orphaning Esmeralda's mom at a young age, forcing her to become a prostitute in order to make ends meet. When Esmeralda's mom caught the eye of a nobleman, she thought her life would be turning around, but he only took advantage of her, got her pregnant, and disappeared. Esmeralda's birth was the only thing that she had to look forward to. But things didn't turn out the way she'd hoped because one day a group of gypsies entered Reims and switched Esmeralda with one of their own children. In her place was the deformed infant that would be Quasimodo. Rumors swirled through the city, insisting that the gypsies had stolen Esmeralda and would feast on her. Esmeralda's mom was devastated and fled the city heartbroken. It's actually kind of ironic because Disney portrays Esmeralda as this feisty fighter for her people's rights, but it turns out she isn't even a gypsy in her actual story and instead was actually abducted by these same people. And it gets worse from here. 15 years pass and baby Agnes is now 16-year-old Esmeralda. Her name is not the only thing that's changed over the years either. Esmeralda is fully a part of the gypsy community, happily dancing and performing each day in the squares of Paris with her pet goat Jolly, who she's trained to do many tricks that would soon get Esmeralda in trouble with the law, and more specifically, Claude Frollo, who in the film was the villainous judge, but in the book is the Archdeacon of Notre Dame Cathedral. Claude is also the caretaker of Quasimodo at this point in the story, and after seeing her performing on the streets, Frollo orders Quasimodo to capture her. Long story short, Quasimodo fails because of Phoebus, our knight in shining armor, and the creep we'll get to in a minute, and ends up being convicted of attempted kidnapping. And this is where we see Quasimodo in the movie being sent off to the public square and being locked into the turntable for the townspeople to throw trash and rocks at him. It wasn't because he escaped to the festivals of fools, rather it was because he tried to kidnap Esmeralda for Frollo and then failed. And funny enough, Esmeralda sees her attempted kidnapper being tormented in the square and ends up bringing Quasimodo some water, which really ticks off a nun in the crowd named Sister Gudule, who apparently hated gypsies. After this nun starts yelling curses and spitting on her, Esmeralda sheepishly stumbles down the stairs and runs away into the crowd. Definitely not the same feisty Esmeralda that Disney portrays in their movie. But do keep in mind the nun, because she makes a very shocking confession at the end of this story to Esmeralda. And let's not forget Mr. Knight in shining armor, Phoebus. Well, more like creep in shining armor when you look at what he does in this version of the story. A certain situation between Phoebus and Esmeralda arises after he saves her from the kidnapping debacle with Quasimodo. One day, Esmeralda is walking down the street with her goat, and she happens to pass by the house of Phoebus's fiancée, some lady named Fleur de Lis. And let's just say that Fleur and her friends are not fans of Esmeralda and are filled with jealousy at her loveliness. On this particular day, they call her over just to talk and end up ridiculing her about her clothes and appearance. And actually, Phoebus is there and tries to make peace between the ladies, but ultimately fails as the women grab Esmeralda's bag, causing these wooden blocks with letters to fall out. And let's just say Jolly isn't the best wingman, because at this point he takes the blocks and spells out Phoebus's name, a trick Esmeralda taught him to do in the secrecy of her own company. And this really ticks off Fleur, who starts yelling at Esmeralda and accuses her of being a witch, and in a dramatic fashion faints immediately after. Esmeralda takes this opportunity to flee the scene, with Phoebus following suit. The drama doesn't end there, of course. If you haven't caught on by now, Esmeralda is kind of obsessed with Phoebus, to the point where she's taught her pet goat to spell out his name with wooden blocks. And Mr. Creep Phoebus is only entertaining her for, let's just say, more intimate reasons. But up until this point in the story, Esmeralda has done a pretty good job at keeping her love/obsession for him on the down low. Until one day, she and Phoebus are alone and she blurts out to him that she loves him. And of course, our man of honor plays along like he feels the same way, but ends out blurting out some nonsense about not understanding what the point of marriage is. Of course, Esmeralda starts crying and Phoebus tries to comfort her and he tells her to move on. But of course she can't. She is major obsessed, and long story short, they end up kissing. But, plot twist, they weren't alone. Yep, that's right, there was another creep lurking in the background. During their makeout sesh, neither of them knew that Frollo was spying on them the whole time. Frollo, our second man of honor, is not happy with this makeout sesh because he also has an obsession with Esmeralda. He gets so jealous that he jumps out and stabs Phoebus and takes off. And of course, the ladies in this story have the same physical reaction to drama, meaning Esmeralda ends up fainting only to wake up being framed for murder despite there being no physical dead body around her when she comes to. And for the record, Phoebus didn't actually die, but to this court, that's just a technicality. They need someone to prosecute, and after threatening to crush her foot, Esmeralda admits to the crime. Between the confession of murder and the accusation of witchcraft by Fleur, Esmeralda is sentenced to death. Frollo comes in to save the day and tells her he'll get her freed if she'll be with him, but a disgusted Esmeralda tells him that she'd rather die than take him up on that offer. So the next day she's taken to the gallows to be hanged. And let's just say Esmeralda's bad choice in men isn't even the worst part of this entire story when it compares to her ultimate demise. Like the movie, our story progresses to Quasimodo saving the day by swinging down from the cathedral to save Esmeralda right as she's about to be burned alive and carrying her back to sanctuary at the cathedral. The two talk a bit, but Esmeralda has trouble even looking at Quasimodo because of his physical deformities. Regardless, they form a quick but superficial bond, and, like in the movie, as long as she stays in the cathedral, she's safe. But this is where the similarities end, because outside the cathedral, the gypsies make plans to break Esmeralda out of Notre Dame and take her with them, thinking that she is being held captive there because they overheard that the guards were planning on seizing her there. Quasimodo sees them attack the cathedral and thinks they've come to kill Esmeralda, so he goes off on a killing spree, fending off as many of the gypsies as he can from entering the cathedral. While Quasimodo was busy with that, a frustrated Frollo takes this diversion as an opportunity to sneak into the cathedral and give Esmeralda the same ultimatum as before. Choose to be with me or die. Like, if she chose death over you once, buddy, she's probably going to do it again. And of course, she does tell Frollo that she chooses death yet again. In fact, she demands execution. So Frollo and another guy, Gringoire, drag her out of the cathedral and place her in a cell with none other than Sister Gudule, the same nun who verbally attacked Esmeralda at Quasimodo's public humiliation meeting. Another plot twist, turns out that nun was her real mother from the beginning. They figured this out in a very Cinderella-like way. Apparently both are carrying around the same pink baby shoe, a matching set from when Esmeralda was an infant. They start crying and hugging, but the party doesn't last for very long because officers barge in to take Esmeralda to be hanged. Esmeralda's mother holds on to her for dear life, trying to get the officers off her daughter. But tragically, as the guard yanks the older woman away, she falls against the hard floor, banging her head, and dies. Esmeralda is then dragged to the gallows and publicly executed. Back at Notre Dame, Quasimodo climbs to the highest peak of the cathedral and sees Esmeralda's figure in a white dress hanging from her noose. He howls out in despair and grief and grabs Frollo by the neck and throws him down to his death. With a dead Frollo and Esmeralda side by side at the bottom, Quasimodo cries out, "This is everything I ever loved," while staring at Frollo and Esmeralda. No one ever hears of Quasimodo again. But years later, they find something really strange in the building used for storing the dead bodies at Notre Dame. There are obviously skeletons everywhere, littering the floor from top to bottom. But interestingly enough, two of those skeletons were found joined together amongst all of the bones from people long gone. Turns out, Quasimodo entered the building, found Esmeralda's corpse, and held it in his arms until he starved to death. Yeah, not the prettiest or happiest ending for anyone, huh? Esmeralda's mother gets her only child stolen from her at the beginning and ends up dying trying to protect her at the end, but to no avail because Esmeralda ends up getting hanged for not agreeing to be with a creepy Frollo. Frollo himself gets chucked off a balcony to his death, and Quasimodo not only loses everyone he thought he ever loved, but in his grief-stricken state ends up hugging the dead corpse of Esmeralda until he later dies himself. A tragic ending for all, with no one getting their happily ever after. And kind of gruesome ending when you think about it. Clearly, Disney went above and beyond in changing this original story to fit a younger and more innocent crowd. But what do you think about the real story behind Esmeralda and her ultimate and gruesome demise? Let us know in the comments below.